Hello and welcome to Personality. I'm your host, Lori Rawlings of Lori Rawlings and Associates. And my guest today is Tracey Carey, the Executive Director of Midwest Urban Strategies. Midwest Urban Strategies is a workforce innovation laboratory that's a consortium of 13 of the largest urban workforce boards in the Midwest. Its mission is to grow business investment and expand and diversify talent in the Midwest. Tracey has more than 2 decades of service developing workforce development programs and strategies. She was the director of strategic initiatives for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Milwaukee, where she facilitated summer youth employment and provided jobs for more than 500 young people annually. In 2014, she joined Employ Milwaukee, which is the workforce development board for Milwaukee County, as the director of fund development and strategic initiatives. And then in 2018, she became the chief strategy officer at Partner for Work, the workforce development board for the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And now she's the executive director of Midwest Urban Strategies. So Tracey, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So for those of us in the audience who might not know what a workforce development board is, could you explain a little bit about what they are and what their missions are?
Sure, I could give you the wonky version, but I think I'll give you the simpler version of it. So,
Okay.
workforce development boards are the local organizations that are charged with coordinating the services related to supporting employers and job seekers. And their work is really about making sure that the workforce has access to training and support services necessary to help them move along a career pathway and make sure that employers have the support necessary to connect those workers into their employment opportunities. It's really that simple.
Okay, great. And so Midwest Urban Strategies, it's a consortium of 13 of those agencies. Can you tell us about what Midwest Urban Strategies is and what its mission is?
Absolutely. Well, our mission is to advance the strategies of the workforce development ecosystem in those local areas in order to understand best practices in workforce development and to really begin to understand how to replicate and scale what those practices tell us are most effective. And so our membership is made up largely of the large urban communities across the Midwest region. You know, you can think about cities like Detroit and Chicago and Kansas City, Minneapolis and Cincinnati. That scale of cities in the Midwest organized back in 2014. During that time frame, the law that governs the public workforce system was changing. And so those changes were going to create new requirements for those communities around how they serve people. And so we organized back in 2014 to really think together about how we would do those new ways of operating our businesses. And it meant bringing in new partners, thinking about new configurations of service delivery. And so it really was helpful to bring together a group of experienced workforce board leaders who had seen the various iterations of the public workforce system from back in the JTPA days all the way up to what at that time was the Workforce Investment Act, or WIA. They had all that experience, and now they were being asked to move into this new iteration of the law, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. Two important words in there: innovation and opportunities. And so we really leaned into that idea of innovation in a public context. How do we apply innovation strategy to the work that a public workforce system would be doing? And so we have spent the last 10 years exploring what innovation looks like. And it's been an interesting journey, and we've done a lot of learning. And I think we've really created some effective strategies and programs that are impacting both our employers and our job seekers.
Amazing. So what are some of the innovations that have come out of this partnership?
I think one of the biggest things that has emerged from this is the power of our ability to um, manage change together and to learn with and from each other. It buys down the cost of that change management and makes it easier for us to implement those programs. So, for instance, registered apprenticeship has been in existence in the building trades for 150 years, forever, right?
Hmm.
In other industries, it was not something that was a traditional way of doing business, and so part of the new change in the law, the WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, required understanding registered apprenticeship. And these workforce boards had no context about that, right? Most
Okay.
of them had never really, other than their sort of passing relationships with the building trades, they didn't really have any understanding about how to do apprenticeship. And through our partnership, we really have dug deeply into how to advance registered apprenticeship as a tactic for industries beyond manufacturing and the skilled trades. And they've learned how to do that and how to contextualize that at a local level. And it really has been a powerful change agent model for those local boards and then sort of the industry writ large nationally.
That's great because I often say that apprenticeship is the best kept secret
Mm.
in workforce development. I didn't know anything about it until I became an executive director of a construction contractors association. And as I would sit as a committee member on various construction trades apprenticeships, I was like, wait, what? You get paid to go to school and paid to learn on the job, and you come out with no college debt and a skilled trade where you're making family sustaining wages right away? Like, why don't more people know about this, and why don't we use this model in other industries? So it's great that you and your partners are doing that. And can you give us some examples of other industries that you've been able to expand apprenticeship to?
Sure. So we have spent time building out apprenticeship programs in the healthcare industry, and so there are lots of good examples of apprenticeship programs for CNAs and MAs. Here in Wisconsin, they've just this past year unveiled the registered nurse registered apprenticeship program. I believe you had David Polk on at some point, but the Wisconsin Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards is doing fantastic work. So healthcare is big. IT is another really big industry. It makes sense, right, in IT to do registered apprenticeship because that is very skill and competency based, and it allows for the demonstration of those skills in a way that helps to move people up that ladder and allows them to have see that wage increase at the same time. We're doing work right now in the early childhood education space, and that registered apprenticeship work is really important, we believe, in helping to solidify that industry, which was so deeply impacted. I mean, the folks who are doing that work, caring for our littlest people, and educating them, um, have always been undervalued and under-resourced and underinvested, right? That has always been the case, but that really became apparent during the pandemic. Just how critical that industry is to our ability to function as humans and
Right.
working people, and how fragile that industry is.
Mhm.
And one of the big challenges for the workforce system, candidly, was that industry doesn't pay a living wage
Mhm.
usually. And because of that, and because of low access to benefits, all those job quality things, there's high churn. And
Mhm.
so for workforce boards, investing in occupations like childcare, it was difficult to do because we want to make sure we're investing public resources in jobs and occupations that are going to move people into the middle class, right? We want to see
Right.
living wages and sustainable jobs and high job quality. And so for a long time, there wasn't a lot of investment in the childcare industry from the public workforce system. But past COVID, it really has become a priority. And we believe registered apprenticeship is one of those tools that can help drive wages in that industry. Now, there are finite resources and there are lots of complexities to the childcare industry, but because of the structure of registered apprenticeship, it requires wage increases as part of the framework. It does create the opportunity to begin to build those wages in that industry. And so we see it as a really important emerging practice.
That's wonderful. How does Midwest Urban Strategies then go about identifying industries with workforce development growth potential, like early childhood education and healthcare?
So, I think one of the things that's interesting about how Midwest Urban Strategies is organized is that we are kind of an inside outsider. I like to use that phrase. We're an inside outsider. So I know how workforce boards work because I've worked at two of them. And I know what their soft spots are. I know where some of their rough edges are. And so I have that knowledge and experience so I can approach um, those uh, those organizations and their leadership from a trusted position. And that allows us to be sort of that safe space. And it is through that relationship that we are able to learn about their local area, understand better what the dynamics in that area are. Understanding labor market information, that's easy peasy, right? There's tools to do that. But to really understand it, to know who the key players are in a community, you've got to have trusted brokers who are willing to share that information. That's where our investments come in. So when we are investing, and we do this, we act as a pass-through entity for funding that Midwest Urban Strategies gets, and then we invest in our local communities with those dollars. We do that in response to what we learn from those on-the-ground relationships, our priorities. And we have a number of projects that are operating currently, and that we've already completed as well, that help us continue to learn about what's happening in those communities. Another thing that we do that really helps us keep our finger on the pulse is that we meet in our local communities twice a year. And so a community will be the host city. We'll be in Detroit this October 22nd through the 24th. And we will spend time in that community learning about how their workforce system is structured, what are some of their key partnerships, what are their pain points, how are they organizing their work, and those folks who come to the convening get to experience that live and in person. And it's a very curated and boutique experience, while at the same time being very educational. And so we learn from that. My team brings back all the goodies, and then we think about, all right, how do we operationalize this? What are some of the new and emerging things that we see happening on the horizon? And then from there, we sort of plan and get ready to execute. So that's kind of how we do that.
So it's analogous to a peer group meeting for the contractors in the audience, or the association executives, or training directors, business managers, where you get together with people who have the same job as you in another area of the country and then share best practices.
Yes.
So I know you had a convening in St. Louis a few months ago. Can you tell us a little bit about what best practices you learned through that experience?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that's the other part of our convenings, that we have fun. So we know how to
That's
throw a
awesome.
party. So um, we had a great time. The focus for that convening was directed at the intersection of economic development and workforce development. And we believe that you need to have both sides of that coin represented. You can attract an employer or a business to a community, but if you don't have a workforce plan in place to support that business, it's just not going to work, right?
Right.
So those two operating in tandem is critical. And St. Louis is in this beautiful change state where they are leading some fantastic work and their mayor is has shepherded a strategic plan to do neighborhood-based transformation on the north side of St. Louis. And so they have an economic justice plan that they are implementing in partnership with a number of organizations. And so we got to learn all about how they're implementing that economic justice plan. They have acquired a number of vacant properties and vacant lots that they've assembled so that they can begin to bring industry back into the city.
Oh, wow.
They're building out. They're calling it the Monarch. We learned about that name after our convening, but it will be a central development zone where people, small businesses and small contractors who are looking to grow their business and get support can go to get that hands-on support. And I think so. I think the thing that we learned while we were in St. Louis is that when you bring the economic development department, agency, organizations together under the leadership with the vision of that, leader, mayor, county exec, whomever it might be, with the workforce development agency, our board and its partners, that's where the change can really happen. And it can happen at that neighborhood level where you're really bringing in the resources and supports necessary to transform that community, which is truly blighted right now.
Hmm.
And their plan over the next 15 years will bring tens of millions of dollars into that neighborhood to help get those folks back to work, build businesses, because many of those folks are currently acting as entrepreneurs, but they need help. I think there's lots of folks in the skilled trades who have side businesses or side hustles,
Sure.
or they start their own business. This is the same sort of model. So that intersection, I think, became very clear about how important it is and how, when used well, it can really be transformative.
That's great. That's amazing. And so you mentioned the economic justice plan. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the details of that plan?
So it is a plan that is specifically directed at the north side of St. Louis, and it includes there are a number of organizations that have committed resources. They will be doing some co-location at this place that I referenced is now being called the Monarch Center. The Workforce Board will be there. The Economic Development Organization will be there. There will be some manufacturing facilities like fab centers set up inside of this facility. And a Small Business Development Center will be anchored there. They're working to build out some home buyer programs to support the community to buy their own homes. There will be a child care center on site to
Wow.
support the neighborhood because there just isn't enough child care. So it'll be like a comprehensive center that includes work opportunities, small business development opportunities, training opportunities, and then sort of that community development support. And that's what it is. And they're investing um, millions and millions of dollars into this initiative, and it's already had a deep impact and will continue to do so.
That's incredible. I mean, it sounds like a very holistic approach to supporting all the different inputs that are necessary for economic growth, including business mentoring and childcare, which are two of the most critical supports that are necessary for starting and maintaining a small business. And I love the name, the Monarch Center, because the visual is of someone who's being reborn
Yes.
into something beautiful that can take flight. That's really inspiring.
Yeah.
So I know that another partnership that you have at Midwest Urban Strategies is with the Early Childhood Workforce Connector. Speaking of early childhood education and childcare, and the goal is to grow registered apprenticeships in early childhood education. So, can you tell us a little bit about some of the specifics of that initiative?
Yeah, so that was an opportunity that emerged from some organizing work that we had been doing to coalesce sort of a brain trust, if you will, of national thought leaders from various sides of this issue. It's not a surprise that we get real comfortable with our little silo of folks that we know and understand. So workforce
Mhm.
board folks talk to workforce board folks, and building trades industry folks talk to those folks, and early childhood education people they talk to the early childhood education people, um, and you know unfortunately, when that happens, the resources and sort of opportunities to see things in new ways is limited, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so early childhood education has forever been left kind of to their own devices to figure out how to solve the complex set of problems that they get confronted with on a daily basis. And so I believed that it was important that we start to have a conversation about how the workforce development system and its ancillary network of partners could bring resources to support the early care industry. And so we organized a group of thought leaders, and among that group of leaders was a subset that would go on to form the Early Childhood Workforce Connector. We culminated that initial organizing work with a national call. We had the White House there, we had the Administration for Children and Families there, we had the Department of Commerce there, we had like a lot of stakeholders on this call to really launch the initiative. And then about a month later, DOL put out a call for applications to lead an industry intermediary to advance registered apprenticeship in early childhood education. And we partnered with two other organizations to respond to that call. And so out of that was born the Early Childhood Workforce Connector, which is a partnership of three entities. And so the ECWC has been in operation now for a year. We are working deeply in 24 states. We've had contact with 37 at this point, and we are working to, at the ground level, connect those childcare businesses and organizations to the resources and supports they need to build out registered apprenticeship programs. And that was one sentence. It's a very complicated system. Registered apprenticeship can be complicated
Mhm.
for entities that are small and already operating on very thin margins. It really does require a fair amount of support for them. We need to help them find resources, financial resources, um, uh, program resources, educational resources, partnership resources. And so we bring those supports to those programs that are looking to invest in their workers. And that's the most humbling thing about this work, is that these very small, and these are businesses, let's be real about it, they are owned and operated by women, primarily Black and brown women, who shoulder the responsibility for caring for children and educating children. And they have done that on their own without any support, and um, done an amazing job of doing so. And now they want to invest further in their workforce because they know that they're not paying them enough. They
Mhm.
know that they're not able to help them advance in their own careers just because they're limited in their resources. So
Mhm.
they're looking for opportunities to do that. And registered apprenticeship has proven one of those ways that they can do that. So they'll build out registered apprenticeship programs. Either depends on what kind of state you're in, an Office of Apprenticeship state or a state apprenticeship agency state. I won't go into the complexity of that today, but um, so how the apprenticeship program gets developed depends on what kind of state you live in and what the rules are. But we try to tie that apprenticeship program to the quality standards for education that exist in that state for early childhood education, so that those folks are able to move up that career ladder and advance their standing through the development of credentials and degrees that positions them to move along that ladder into leadership and earn, a living wage. So that's the end goal for us, is to support those businesses to develop their internal capacity to support their workers, to advance both educationally, as well as economically. And that's what the ECWC is all about. And we're really grateful to be part of it.
That's such an exciting initiative because I can see how that improves economic development for the whole community. Because I
Yes.
was just reading an article this morning about how women's employment drops seasonally during the summer, because it's primarily the women who are parents of school-age children who don't have easy access to childcare during the summer because school's out, and school is a form of childcare for many of us. My son is sitting at my feet right now because camp ended 2 weeks before school started. And that really impacts people's ability to work. And so, creating a more sustainable family sustaining wage and career path for early childhood educators and caregivers will have a ripple effect that allows more people to continue working consistently, which raises um, the economic success of the whole community. So,
Yeah.
congratulations. That's a really great initiative you're working on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fantastic that we're able to do it. There are some really interesting initiatives that are being led by other industries to respond. So the semiconductor industry, the Department of Commerce required those businesses that wanted to apply for support through the Department of Commerce funding, that they have a child care plan in place. Those businesses needed to figure out how they were going to address the child care issue. And so we do see the semiconductor industry beginning to, you know, try to think about how they can position that. The construction industry also there has done some work around that. So in Milwaukee here, and then in New York City, um, there is a pilot project that's been operating to support apprentices with their childcare needs, as a way to ensure that we have apprentices completing their apprenticeship program.
Hmm.
Because you're right, too often women end up having to drop out of their career because they need to care for their children. And so we're working really hard across a variety of partnerships to solve that problem. It means that women have significant, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in wage loss,
Hmm.
for an individual, and then the advancement that women are losing, as they're stepping out. And that's not to say that caring for children, if that's the choice you make to step out of your career and be a mom full time, like that's a full time job, right?
Absolutely.
That's completely um, a valued way to spend your time. But for those women who want to stay in the workforce but can't afford to do so because of the cost of childcare, it's something that we need to care about and think about.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the other initiatives that Midwest Urban Strategies is working on?
So a couple of things. We kind of have our hands in a bunch of stuff, as you're probably getting the sense of here. But one of the areas that we have leaned deeply into is those folks who don't necessarily find their way naturally into a workforce board. I think that there is unfortunately sometimes this perception that workforce boards are sort of like kind of like welfare agencies or something like that.
Hmm.
And so a lot of folks don't want to be connected to that, and so they don't necessarily walk through those doors. And so we've been working with our members to help them think through how to make the system more relevant for current time, and how to make it feel more accessible for everybody. And so looking at those populations who don't naturally come through the door, how do we make things more accessible? How do we create various ways, whether it's virtual access to services, which was something we dug deeply into during COVID. It was a hard time for everybody. For the public workforce system, when everybody got laid off, it was
Mhm.
really challenging to try and support people. So we had to spend a great deal of time thinking through how to do virtual eligibility and enrollment processes and how to support people virtually. And so those systems have been set up. We also do a lot of work with the reentry population. And so we're doing some work with folks who are currently incarcerated and transitioning out to prepare them with skills and credentials so that they are employable. Because when you leave that facility, the chances of you recidivating increase exponentially if you don't have a job.
Mhm.
And so we're working really hard to get folks connected to employment that is sustainable for them so that they are earning a living wage and can avoid that recidivating. Young people is another area that we go deep on. How do we make sure that the services we're delivering to young people is adequately preparing them for the careers of the future?
Yeah.
And I think I'll end on digital equity. So, as we're looking at the world across all industries, you cannot avoid the need to have a technology basis. Like
Mhm.
that is a bottom line skill and set of knowledge that every worker must have at this point. And there
Mhm.
is a divide between people who do and people who don't. So
Mhm.
we're working to solve that divide as well.
Wow. That's a really broad range of exciting but daunting projects that you're working on. So, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about the work you do?
I think that the message that I would want people to hear loud and clear is that the public workforce system, which is the system that workforce development boards exist in, is is organized and designed to meet the needs of local employers and job seekers. It exists for you. It's here for you. It's funded with taxpayer dollars, and it had most of those organizations. The taxpayer funded portion of their budgets is minimal, so they're having to get other dollars in there to support the operation. But the reason it exists is to make sure that people who are looking for a job, maybe their first job. We, we like to refer to it as the ABCs of workforce development: any job, better job, career, right? You might be looking for that first job, or you might be looking to advance. The Workforce Development Board is available to help you access training that they can, in many instances, help to cover or connect you to resources so that you don't have to come out of pocket. And for employers who are listening, know that the Workforce Development Board in your local area has resources that can assist you as you're looking to grow your talent base. And so I would encourage you to reach out to them and let them know what your needs are and work with them to solve those challenges because these resources are there for you. And that would be the thing that I would want to say.
I really appreciate you pointing that out because in the construction industry specifically, as you know, we are facing an amazing workforce shortage at this point. For every one skilled trades worker we're bringing in right now, we're losing five to retirement. And so I I really appreciate you pointing out that employers in that industry and any other industry who are struggling to find qualified people don't have to do it alone. They have a built-in partner in their local workforce development agency. And so I appreciate you pointing that out. And I also appreciate what you were saying earlier about trying to remove some of the stigma attached with people walking through the doors and trying to connect with the work that workforce development boards do, because it's so important for people to realize that there is a system in place that's designed to help individuals skill up and get wraparound services to help them find and stay in well-paying, meaningful work. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, Tracy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I know that you're always insanely busy all over the place trying to lift up the economic situation of communities around the Midwest. So I really appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us today.
Lori, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk a bit about Midwest Urban Strategies. And I want to thank you for all of the good work that you're doing to broadcast all of the efforts that are happening
Thank you.
in this space.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So, for those of you who want to learn more about Midwest Urban Strategies, I'm going to include their website in the show notes, so you can connect with them, take a look at what they're doing, and figure out if there's a way that they can help you either grow your business or you as an individual to reskill or upskill for a career that helps you sustain yourself and your family.